Hey everyone, welcome. That piece was a piece of music by Blue Loop Sound. Joe, I saw that you'd commented. She's a friend of mine, so I thought today we'd just share that for the beginning. Welcome back to the Yorkshire Sound Women Network's Level Up in Audio seminar series. I'm Jess, and I'm going to be hosting the 7th event today with our guest Anna Bertmark. So this event series features musical artists and audio professionals presenting and sharing their projects, ideas and experiences. A few things to note before we start. Please refrain from taking any screenshots or recordings. We're going to record the session. In fact, we're recording it right now, so it will be available at a later date to view. If you wish to remain anonymous in the call, feel free to turn off your camera. That's absolutely fine. And just remember to go on mute whilst other people are talking. If you have any questions throughout the talk, then write them in the chat section and we'll come back to them when it's an appropriate time. So you don't forget them, write them in the chat and I will raise the questions. And alternatively, at the end, we'll have a chance for questions as well. So you can save your question for the end if you want to ask it. So I'd like to introduce our guest today, Anna Bertmark. Anna is a sound designer and a sound supervisor. She's going to unpick those roles further. With over 15 years experience, she's worked on several acclaimed and award-winning British feature films such as God's Own Country, The Goob, Adult Life Skills, and You Were Never Really Here. As well as doing sound design for film, Anna also works on sound for TV dramas, adverts, and VR 360 videos. She's experienced in many different aspects of sound design, from dialogue editing to complete sound post-production supervision, which hopefully she's going to explain a bit more about. Anna has previously had the position of Vice Chair of the Association of Motion Picture Sound, and she's also the co-founder of Women Who Are Sound, which is a network of women and gender non-conforming colleagues who are working in or studying sound for film, TV, and interactive media. Sounds awesome. So today, focusing on film, and we're going to hear from Anna about the different and varied roles within the film sound department. She's going to run through the stages and process of designing sound for film, from the beginning ideas to the end product. And with all her experience, I'm sure Anna has much advice and wisdom to impart. So there'll be lots of chances for questions and advice. So Anna, I'm going to hand over to you. Thank you.
Oh, yeah, can you hear me now? Yes. Hi, thank you so much for having me here. It's really nice to meet you all and chat to you tonight. I'm in Brighton at the moment. It's been a sunny day finally. We've been, but yeah, it's lovely summer's evening. So thanks for having me. So I'm gonna as just said, talk about sound supervision and sound design for films, which and some TV as well, which I'm going to talk a bit the differences between those two. But yeah, I've been doing it for a while, and I thought I'd start with just talking a bit about how I started out. So I'm from Sweden originally. I came over to the UK, to London in 2001. That is 20 years ago, believe it or not. I can't believe it. And to literally just because I wanted to study something called music technology at uni, because there was one place to study music tech in Sweden at the time, and it was very like music engineering, and it was up in a university. It was so far north that you had like an average 3 hours of daylight in winter. So I'm from the south. I'm from Malmo. Just, I don't know if you know it. There's a bridge. The bridge, that's where I'm from, and that goes over to Denmark. So that's where I'm from. So yeah, I didn't really fancy living in the dark for that much, and cold as well. So I'm like, no, I like the sound of London. Never been in London before, so I got into a music tech course in London, and I was very, very excited. It was called Rose Bruford College. It was a drama school. They had a small 2 or 3 kind of digital arts colleges at the courses at the time. So yeah, I got into that and I loved it, and had no idea that sound was a job until I graduated and was trying really hard to find a job related to what I'd studied. And at the time, I graduated about 2004, 4, something like that. There was obviously Napster was a big deal online, music online. You could download MP3s. That was a thing. But lots of music studios closed down because CD sales were plummeting and iTunes were taking off and all this. So And also because of music tech, now lots of bands were recording their music at home in their bedrooms, and that was quite a popular thing at the time. So I was really struggling to find a job at a studio. My dream was to be a music producer, like so many other kids at the time. So I basically looked for a lot of jobs, and I found this small ad that said we're looking for a sound assistant in a small sound company in North Soho. And I was like, all right, I guess I'll apply to that. So again, it was for a guy called Paul Davies, who's quite in the industry, quite a well-known sound designer. He's quite an art house sound designer, works a lot with Lynn Ramsey. It's kind of a long-time collaborator of hers. So I became his assistant. I had no idea what sound effects. It's a job, you can do that. It's a film. I knew that film music was a thing. So I basically just fell in love with the craft, because it is a craft and it's very much a team sport. The enthusiasm of all the people I worked with in that company, we were only 4 people. It was great, because he had a kind of self-imposed policy that there was a 50-50 gender split in the company, which was a big deal 20 years ago. I was really lucky to be in an environment where that was really that was great, and I learned a lot, and the enthusiasm and passion for the job really from everyone I worked with really rubbed off on me. So I was like, I want to be really good at this is awesome. And I think especially the first time when I walked into a sound mix, and a sound mix is basically when you have, this is the very end of the process. I'm going to go through the process a bit later, but very end of the process, you sit, imagine a cinema, you take all the chairs out, you put a huge mixing desk in, and you sit there in the dark just with this big screen, just listening through all the elements, the dialogue, the Foley, the music, the sound effects, and you kind of, it's like molding a piece of clay kind of in a digital way down to like what the director wants it to sound like. So play around with it. And I sat in there and I literally had this moment where I was like, this is the best. It was the coolest thing ever. And also I wanted to be an astronaut. Before I got into music, I want to be an astronaut. I've always didn't have the brains to get into the natural sciences, and I was like, this is the closest I'm going to get to space, because it did feel like you were on like, in this space station or something like that, because you just had this kind of big screen and that was the film, and you had all the flashy lights and all that, and it was great. So I fell in love with it. So, and then I worked for Paul for a while and learnt dialogue editing, sound effects editing, and then the financial 2008 happened, and that affected the industry hugely. So lots of little companies went bust. Lots of people who had no idea how to be a freelancer had to go freelance, and just keep going as best we could. So I became a freelancer, and then I really struggled to find kind of job as a sound editor, because I didn't know many people, and also I was a young woman at the time, and it was a very blokey industry, I realized, and it was a bit tricky. So I decided to become a sound supervisor, because I knew that was what Paul did. I had reference from him, and I was like, right, I'll just approach up and coming directors and producers and say, hey, I can do the film for you, I've got contacts, don't worry, I'll figure it out. And and that's how I kind of started to get contacts, and that's what it's all about. It's really building up a network of people, your peers, maybe your same age group, anyway, so, and then I did supervision for a few years, and that led on to lots of really cool stuff. So that's how I started working Pro Tools. Pro Tools is the industry standard still, because especially when you want to collaborate with others, if you're doing everything on your own, it doesn't really matter what software you work in, but Pro Tools is something in which you kind of need to know the basic stuff if you want to get into it still. Although I think Paul used a software called Nuendo, made by Steinberg. If you know Cubase, Nuendo is like the big sister of Cubase, and Nuendo is in my mind, a superior editing platform, because it's really it's a lot more intuitive, and it can do more cleverer things, and it's a lot cheaper than Pro Tools. However, in the UK and the US, America, which we get a lot of influence from, in the industry in the UK, Pro Tools is a thing. But Nuendo is very much used. It's quite kind of a 50-50 Nuendo Pro Tools in other parts of the world, and especially like Europe and Germany and France and things like that. They use Nuendo a lot. So that's how I started out. Jess, any other kind of, should I go into, what should I talk about next? Should I talk about the team, or?
I mean, I think it would be great to know a bit about who's who in the industry, because you've mentioned that you're a sound designer and a sound supervisor, and yeah, maybe a breakdown of the different roles within the industry.
So great. So let's see. So yes, I start as an assistant. That's usually how people start, and then you get to really learn a bit of everything. An assistant, I think the assistants I worked with recently, it's really just, you really get to, it might sound obvious, but assisting everyone, but also you do a lot of tasks which the other people might not do. So you kind of do a lot of technical things and learning at something which is, there's a lot of kind of technicalities involved with especially film and TV sound, especially when if I start from the start of the process, which is like the shoot, when you are on sets and you're filming the actors, you have something called production sound mixer, which is kind of the head of the location sound department. Especially if you got a big team, if you're only one person recording sound on set, or if you do a documentary, you should call yourself a sound location recordist or sound recordist. So, and then the production sound mixer have the boom operators, holding the boom. That's obvious. At least one or two. I think so. It's like you kind of start building the team, and when it comes to the size of teams, it just depends on the budget of the show. So, if you got a small, an indie film in this low budget UK indie, with about maybe under 2 million or things like that, you might have a 3-person team on set, with maybe a 4th person if you're lucky, depending on the genre, depending on lots of things about, how it's being shot. But yeah, team size is all about budget size. That's all kind of correlates like that. So and then the boom operators, you also have second assistants, which do things like, make sure that all the cabling is neat and that everyone's got working radio mics and puts the radio mics on the actors and things like that, and assist with other stuff. So, but the main responsibility of the production sound mixer or the sound location recorders is to get clean dialogue. That's all as it's about. So, you don't really look at any other sounds when you're shooting the scene. You just really make sure you got a clean, loud and clean sound from the actor. So but it's not just the dialogue, it's the performance, because a lot of the time, always something I say, it's like, that's what I went to a talk many years ago by a guy called, oh crikey, his name, sorry, it's been a long day. I'll remember his name. He's does a lot of big blockbusters and things like that, but he was like, we don't just record the sound, we're protecting and capturing the performance of the actor. And I was like, that's such a good way of putting it, because that's what it is. The story is in the words, the story is in the script. There's only so many films or that stories that come through in like mime and film. It is spoken word. So that's it's vital that you capture as good dialogue on set. You can also, depends on the film. We might also ask the sound location recording team to also record things like we call wild tracks. So that's basically something that hasn't got time code on it. It's just literally could be a sound effect, could be an atmos, could be a room tone. You also depends on the script. If it's a script that really, because I always start with the script, and that's all the information I have to start off, before you see anything. So obviously before the production mixer and before they shoot it, all we have is to go on is the script. So I usually do a little, what I call a wish list, because you never know if they can never guarantee it. But if it's a film that specifies perhaps a specific car, or the protagonist drives a motorbike, and they obviously will have that in the film, and the reason why the director has picked this perhaps vehicle, this type of vehicle, is probably really important for the story. So I always ask the production sound mixer, can you also, or if you're an assistant or anyone, could you record some sounds of this vehicle or this you know, if it's anything specific that is mentioned in the script that has a, you know, a characteristic sound. So I asked them to do that. So this is like a mini sound library, and that's usually something that they are the best person to know, you know, obviously what props are you, and they know the team, so it's really for them to find. However, going again, talking about when it's during the film, when it's being shot, a film like God's Own Country, because I had the script for quite some time and I was brought on board before the shoot, this is also something I always want to talk about as well. It's really nice to be brought on board a project as soon as possible, because that means that I can have a chat with the production sound mixer, I can familiarize myself with the really well, I can have a really good chat with the director and ask them, what do you want your film to sound like? And also I can also, if it's possible, go and visit the set. Doesn't mean I'm going to be there kind of, you know, disturbing anyone, because I don't know what they do. I mean, it's not, you know, they do what they do. It's just for me to perhaps record, if I can, a small sound library of the locations. So I go out and record atmospheric sound ambiences. On God's Own Country, I spent 2 days on the Yorkshire moors, walking around. It was lovely. I've never been in that area before, so yeah, it's beautiful. So I got to go up and with my sound recording kit and record some really nice surround 5.0 with my Zoom recorder. I had a Zoom 6 and a couple of mini DPA 4060s. They're tiny little microphones. So I usually use them as and I had an MS kind of rig on my Zoom, so I could derive a kind of a, you know, center, left, right from that. And then I had my 2 little DPAs on my shoulders, literally. And I didn't want to, you know, just like, oh, does it sound good? I don't know, let's try it. So I walked around the Yorkshire moors without, you know, looking a bit funny, walking around. I think it was 7 a.m. when it was misty. It was just, I'll never forget it. It's stunning. And I got all those wind through the grass. I got a huge sound library just of the winds, because it was something I knew that, well, even if the director might not be really into winds, I want winds, because it's going to make a big difference because it's windy. And so I got lots of kind of tools to play with, and I'm almost like I feel like I'm foraging for sounds, right? So yeah, and also doors, if I can get close to, you know, or if it was a contrary, I was lucky because the farm was there and they had a good relationship with the farmer. And also to go while they're shooting, even if they're not shooting in that precise location, there might be somewhere, you know, 5 miles down the road, they're in the area and I can go and say, yeah, I'm with them, and they go, cool, that's fine. Rather than going maybe 6 months later when, you know, it might be harder to get access. So that's why I tend to go when they're shooting and record sound. So whenever I can, I'll go and record even if it's a small library of sound specific and unique for that film as well. So it sounds like the place it's shot in, you know. So that's usually how I start a project. So me as kind of the head, the main sound effects editor, the sound designer, sound supervisor, and yeah, it some kind of differs on how many months between the shoot happens. So I'm doing that to when we start the actual sound post and the sound editing later down the line once we locked picture and I got the team. So the difference really between the terms sound designer, sound supervisor, supervisor, and sound editor, you know, most of the time means the same thing, especially when you're thinking about genres and budgets that are kind of low, medium, things like that. So sound designer just means, I mean, it was coined by Walter Murch when he worked on Apocalypse Now in the 70s. So before then, you know, you had stereo or sometimes just mono in film, so in cinema. So it's a very historical thing. So he was like, when he was being briefed by Francis Ford Coppola about Apocalypse Now, it's like, this film needs this, it's going to be and he was like, and we've got 4 channels in the cinema. Walter was like, right, okay, so we really have to make the sound a bit more considered. It's not just you see a bus, you put a bus sound on, you'll see a plane, you put a plane sound on. It's a bit more artistic, a bit more considered, a lot more subjective, a lot more, you know, arty, a bit more artistic. So you think about things like subjectivity, you know, I sometimes talk about expressionism, you know, using terminology from art and applying it to film sound, because sound is such an abstract thing. which is why it's so hard sometimes to talk to other people about it and to explain it to directors when you work with them, because they're like, I can't see it, I can't touch it, we haven't really got the words, vocabulary to describe sounds in the same way as we have with things that we can see and touch and feel, and so what I tend to do is, rather than try and explain it with words, I just go, okay, what are references? So I usually ask director for references about, it could be a piece of art, it could be another film, it could be a sculpture, it could be a place, it could be a piece of music, and really try and interpret what they mean by that when they say, oh, can you make it, literally had a director 6 months ago go, Phil Collins, yeah, can you make it sound like his, it's like, I was like, what are you talking about? And it's like, do you mean diffuse, like reverb, so you try, and I think with every director you have to almost like learn a new vocabulary of how to talk about sound, right? But that's that's just part of it, and that takes time sometimes, to get to know someone and find out what they don't like. Sometimes if you struggle to find something that they like, it's sometimes easy to start with, what don't you like, pick something you definitely don't want this to sound like. So as a sound designer, it's kind of up for us to sound designers to kind of interpret what the director kind of wants the film to sound like, any references, doing what I call sound sketches, especially on scenes that maybe require more abstract, more kind of non-literal sound design. So so I'm just thinking about Cold Country. I'm going to show you a clip later on, and that kind of illustrates it. But the winds, for example, I guess the winds, because I was like, it was going to be a lot of wind, because the director didn't want much music. So what I tend to like, that approach, when you got less music in a film that's got a lot of drama, you're right, okay, I have to, like, the sound design's got to do a lot of heavy lifting in the emotion here. So almost like scoring a film with sound effects. So how you do that is, it's like, well, a sad wind, a hopeful wind. Then you go into territory like it's all subjective. The director kind of is the one to kind of go, right, this is what I mean by a sad wind. And you go, okay, it's more like, okay, I get it. More, maybe moaning or things like that. So on God's Sake Country, literally, I think I had 50 different types of wind, and sometimes they were layered. And it's something that also you think about it and go like, I don't think the audience is gonna, will the audience understand that we're doing all this work? They might not, but in the detail and in the tiny little things and all the considered things, it does add up. And then it's something that's, it's, even if it's a subconscious thing, you just go, oh, this happening, and they make me feel things. So yeah, again, when it talk about psychoacoustics, like the psychological effects of sound, some things are universal and a lot of things are subjective, and the subjective part, the director is it's their film. You just got to go with what their interpretation is of the sounds, and work up a palette of sounds that you then use to paint what they like. So, but universal kind of sound acoustic example is something like a big, that's very low pitch and very loud. We tend to frighten us because bear, that's it. It's quite straightforward, and and things like that. So there's all these kind of some basic rules that we use in film. Horror film is a classic example. The jump scare, we react to sounds before our bodies react to like a startle sound before we see the thing. So before we see the monster, usually there's a sound, so that we react to. I recommend a great book on that subject if in the chat later, if anyone's interested. I'm really into that, because it's a lot of that is, it's very, very useful as tools to use when you do sound effects and sound design for films. So the sound designer. But then I call myself a sound designer when I design sound, obviously, but a lot of directors and producers sometimes go like, oh, we want a sound designer to do the sound for our film, and they don't realize that it's a team. So I always have to check with like, do you mean you've got the rest of the team in place? You got the mixer, you got the sound recordist, and you just want me to do the sound design? or do you want me to do everything and look, you know, oversee it? And that's always something that I think there is no kind of universal kind of agreed definition of what sound design mean. It's still, you know, Walter Murch coined it because he realized, okay, we have to design it now. It has to be really considered. It's more than, it's like, yeah, it's more of an art. And I think since then, it's, you know, if you talk about film, like a film like a big blockbuster, like the Transformers film, you see in the credits, there's several sound designers. And in that context, it means more like, well, we make sounds that hasn't been heard before. So more like fantasy and sci-fi, you can see lots of the sound designers. And in that context, more like, yeah, you get a team to just come up with new stuff, come up with a fantasy, you know, bits and things like that. So that's sound design in that context. But I think most of the time it just means that you are, working closely with the director, really on the more abstract stuff when the film requires it, when the genre, it's usually very genre led. So horror, fantasy, drama, sometimes drama, especially when there's less music. But yeah, usually led by the director. So yeah, so sorry, I'm waffling. So designer, sound supervisor, sound editor, and sound supervisor, that means that head of the team. So I'm the head of the department, which means that usually it's mainly for practical reasons. Because you got a lot of information that comes, you sort of, it's like a hierarchy, of tree hierarchy. So you got the director, producer at the top, and then you got like, you know, lots of different departments. You got the picture editor, it's another head of the picture department, the sound supervisor, sound editor, sound supervisor means the same thing pretty much. There's a very few sound supervisors who aren't also editors or get their fingers in there or get their hands dirty. You know, I think it's again a budget thing. So for example, someone like that Glenn Fremantle, who is just calls himself a sound supervisor, he just literally is a project manager. He project manages a sound team, and he's got like 50 people working on, you know, on big stuff, and he doesn't really have time to do sound effects. He just goes around each department every day and just checks, how's it going, how's it going, how's it going. So it's a different role. I like making sounds, so I will always call myself a, you know, sound designer or supervising sound editor because I'm editing, but I'm also looking after the team. So yeah, so it's more like team management part in that, and I get to pick my team most of the time. So I'm specifically do sound effects and sound supervision, and then I've got a dialogue editor, an ADR editor. Sometimes it's the same person, sometimes it's several people, depending on, again, the budget, on the schedule. I tend to try and have one person who do all the dialogue editing and all the ADR. ADR stands for additional dialogue recording. So it means that any sounds, as I said before, the most important job of the production sound mix and the sound recordist on set is to capture really good dialogue. If, for example, you're doing a period drama, or this is a good example, like Downton Abbey, if you have a jet engine going above, you know, if it's on the flight path near Heathrow, which it kind of isn't, almost is, it's not that far away, but yes, you can't really, doesn't really work. So if it's too loud, you try and clean it up. That's what the dialogue editor do. They just clean up the dialogue, focus on that, make sure that there's no bumps or hits or little kind of lip smacks and things like that. So you just like immerse yourself in the dialogue. There's no other, you get rid of all the other, you know, unwanted sounds. So you just have the clean dialogue and it's all smooth and lovely. And there's lots of tools for that. There's Isotope, which I don't know if you've heard about that. It's a Isotope is a kind of a bundle of plugins which is for sound restoration. So it's great. All dialogue editors use that. I've got it as well because it can be really useful for podcasts as well. Anytime you've got dialogue, it's really good for cleaning it up. So noise reduction, and it's got like now we can actually also get rid of the pop. If you haven't got a pop shield, that it gets rid of. It's magical. So it saves a lot of things that we're then, you know, trying to reduce the amount of a dialogue that we have to re-record. So anything that then becomes really hard to, okay, there's a flight but plane going past, or there's any other noises that you can't get rid of that is really intrusive, sometimes you might not be able to hear what they're saying. If they're wearing lots of clothes, if your costume, if you got loads of layers, if you have big dresses, or, you know, they're moving around a lot or running or things like that, and you haven't got the boom, the poor boom operator running behind them, you've got a radio mic, and if it's not so close, you're going to be rustle. So if they're talking at the same time, you probably won't be able to use it. So you have to record it. So then you got the ADR session. So you basically got a small studio with a big screen, and the actors go in, see themselves on the screen, and they have to recreate the performance as they did on the day. And because usually there can be months between the day they shot that scene, while they do the picture editing and they lock the picture, and then we'll do some dialogue editing, and then we realize we have to record this. It could be 6 months. So the poor actor, I mean, this is why ADR is really hard, and good ADR is gold. I mean, it's, you know, it's all about the performance really, and the environment. Make sure that the actors are relaxed, they feel they've got enough time to do a good job, the director's there to direct them and make them feel at ease. And you know, some actors love it, some actors hate it, you know, that's it, but it's very much part of the job. So good ADR is ADR that you don't notice. You didn't notice that it was re-recorded after. There's lots of great examples online, I think, if you can go like, wow, like just it's spot on. And they have to lip sync while recreating their performance, which can be really tricky. So yeah, that's quite complex. So that's very technical and very, you know, performance based. So that's all the dialogue and ADR editor's responsibility to make sure the dialogue is beautiful. And then we've got obviously the sound effects that I tend to do. So I do spot effects, which are the doors. Spot effects, we call spot effects because you can say that's the sound. It's coming from there. I can point at it at the screen, and usually they're mono. So doors, cars, what else, explosions, things like that, usually layered up. I mean, when I do a door sound, I usually have at least 2 sounds happening at the same time. So usually it's like a little click, and then there's a boom, the hit. So, and then maybe if it's a door car slamming, if it's slamming, I also have a layer, a kick drum that I roll the top kind of frequency off. There's a boom, it's a thud. So you get that physicality. So you feel it. And so, you know, but not every car door needs that, but it's something I tend to do, anything like that, to give us a bit more kick. So I've laid door sound to have like 10 different sounds, especially if it's like a rattly old door. You know, you get the rattle, you have the hinges, so you kind of, you know, and usually in films as well, like most doors sound different because the houses sound different, because the character, and then you can inject a lot of emotion as well into the sounds. So if it's the baddie of the film is closing the door, it can be, you know, I make it a bit more painful, a bit more aggressive, and I layer perhaps another sound in there, you know, secretly, just to give it a bit more color, a bit more emotion. But yeah, that's just door sounds, but that's a spot effect. And cars, anything that you can, you know, point at is spot effect. And then I've got atmospheres. So atmospheres is stuff that you can't say. The rain is there. The rain is all around. So, you know, I tend to layer that up quite a lot as well. Obviously winds, bird song, unless you can see the bird, then it's a spot effect. You can go, there's the bird, it's a mono. If you're surrounded by birds in a forest, I can put, if I have a beautiful 5.1 recording of that bird or that forest, you know, at the right time. I mean, bird song is also the one thing I'm quite picky, because I worked with someone who was a bird watcher early on in my career, who was like, that bird does not live in that part of the world at that part of the year. And I was like, God, you know, that's, you know. So yeah, I've got a little bird book, so I was double check that, you know, I tend to be really, yeah, picky like that. So and also Graham Gods and Country, I managed to, when I was walking around the moors, I managed to record a northern lapwing that had this really specific, it's really low, kind of, it's just, yeah, you need to, yeah, the director was like, I want that sound, I want that bird, like that's really important. It's very symbolic for him personally as well, that he was like, I want that. So I managed to record one, so and put it in at the right place. So yeah, birds, that's a whole art science on its own. So yeah, and then we've got, so dialogue, sound effects, and then we've got Foley. And Foley there's a Foley department. I tend to only really do Foley myself. It's for a computer game when I can literally do in my house, or if it's for like a little short film or animation or something like that. When I do a film, I have a Foley team, and it's a Foley artist, and they are amazing, and they basically can recreate pretty much most sounds I mean, Foley is defined as anything usually that is done with the hands and feet and the body. So touching skin, putting makeup on, hair, clothes. When someone is walking, you got clothes moves. So you have basically a sheet of where they're walking, footsteps, anything else, handling like gun handling, writing, painting. Yeah, that's all Foley. So sounds that are really hard to do in time from library sounds, because I've got a great sound library, but I would never try and attempt to recreate Foley, unless maybe footsteps if I'm lucky, but because it's so specific with the person, how they walk, what shoes they have, what they're walking on surface. So that's a huge part. So then we got the Foley recordist who's adjusting all the mics, making sure that it was in sync. It doesn't have to be perfectly in sync, but roughly the best kind of Foley artist almost does it in sync, because they always also, like the ADR studio, is pretty similar, but it's bigger and they got lots of different surfaces, and obviously a huge prop department behind, in a room next door. So they see the scene, they do it to picture in time. And then you got the Foley editor that then tweaks and makes sure everything is in sync. And it can be a lot of work, but yeah, these days we all take really good Foley for granted, even in TV shows like Game of Thrones. The Foley work in Game of Thrones, it's incredible. All the leather, and you got like saddles, and that's all squeaky. Someone's standing there with squeaky leather, as the horse walks and stuff like that. Obviously, horse has hooves and everything, so it's great fun. So that's my Foley department. So yeah, and then we got the mixing. So that's when it all comes together. You got a re-recording mixer. That's the same, basically the same. We used to call it dubbing mixer, but nowadays, because in America they call it re-recording mixer, and the UK we call it re-recording mixer as well. And re-recording just comes from the old ways of when you had to re-record like on tape. So we still call it that, although no one works on tape anymore. So that's just an engineer that sits again in the big mixing room with a big mixing desk in the kind of cinema sized room, and we sit there together. I sit with them and the director, usually for about 3 weeks at least, and just listen to the film, make things louder, quieter, mute sounds, maybe add some sounds. And yeah, and obviously that's usually comes, the more creative mix comes after the mixer, the same mixer have been sitting just doing what we call the pre-mix, which is just technically cleaning things up and EQing, making sure, again, do another pass on the dialogue, making sure that all the kind of the EQ is correct and it's loud, it's not too loud, it's not too quiet, and then maybe add reverb as well. And do the same with the sound effects and the Foley. And then in the final mix, we all sit together and it's more of a creative, collaborative process. And obviously we've got the music in there as well. So yeah, that's the sound department, and it's a lot of people. Yeah, it's again, the size of the team depends on how much money they've got to spend and what the film requires. So yeah, does that make sense?
Yeah, it's fascinating, I think, just how much goes into a film. I mean, like the team of people and all of the things that you take for granted, and that have an emotional impact on the, makes you view the film in a certain way. And I always wondered about how they recreate that audio. So thanks for that. I always wondered how that worked. So within your teams and all the people that you're working with across the whole film, how much creative input do you have against, say the director wants something, but you maybe have had experience doing something else and you think you'd like to put a bit of input in there? How much do you have to step back, or how much, how does that work with, across the team?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think the best directors I worked with, not best directors, the directors I worked with were maybe more experienced and had that were easy to work with and were very experienced and were very, what I consider like good collaborators and good, you know, team managers and good creative directors, because that's basically what they are, were those who were very much open, who understood the process. So understand that I mean, no director can be a dictator, you know, they have, you know, any creative process is going to be collaborative and everyone is going to give a bit of themselves into it. That's how it's made. It's made by human, everyone giving a little bit of themselves and putting it all together. So it's interesting because it really depends on a lot of, I guess, depends on the director, depends on the film. And sometimes you get directors who go like, I don't know what I want, you do it. And you go, okay. And you go, what do you, okay. So, and they literally are like, usually first time directors who might not have collaborated with a lot of other people on things. And also sound is really hard to talk about, as we know. So it's more like, it's something usually I tend to, I mean, all you can do is, I mean, I've tried lots of different ways of doing this, but literally all you can do is like, have a chat, ask what the reference are. And then I usually go and because a good director also, what I've got to say for, trusts the people that they've picked because they decide who works on their film. So hopefully I'll get someone who kind of likes what I've done before and trusts me to be able to do it again on their film. That's it. You know, there's not much to it than that. So I tend to go like, okay, trying to get as much information as I can about what they like and what they want the film to sound like. Have a bit of chat, have a couple of chats, and then I do what I call a first pass. So I do a first version of all the sound effects, and usually sound effects mostly because that's usually in the beginning of the process. It's like I can't. The dialogue editor is still working on their stuff. The Foley is still. I haven't got all the stuff ready, so I usually go like, oh, I'm going to do a version of the sound effects and the atmospheres. I'm going to show that. I mean, I have something called a sound effects review. So maybe 3 weeks after we've locked the picture. It's kind of when locked picture means like the edit should be finished and they shouldn't be messing with it. I mean, they might add some visual effects and CGI and stuff, but when the timings of the sounds that happen on screen shouldn't really change, so I can really get stuck in. So usually I do something first pass where I literally take all the notes that and references the director's giving me, and then do a version of the film of the sound effects that I've taken that in mind, what I think would work. And sometimes the notes that they've given me doesn't really cover obviously everything, but I usually my interpretation of it, and and then they sit with me for a day and we go through it and we listen to it, and it's a really nice time because I usually want to sit with them for a day and just listen to it. Don't think about the grade, because again, a director, usually this in post-production, which is the obviously time where picture's been locked, sound is happening. At the same time, sound is happening, and there's a deadline looming. And the director's probably working on this for maybe several years. This is like their baby is coming to life, and they're A, excited, B, freaking out, and lots of it's very emotional. So you have to be like, okay, let's just sit for a day, listen to the sounds, focus on these sounds. This is how you feel film's going to sound like. And then they might go, oh, I like that. I don't like that. I like that. I don't like that. And, as you watch through it. And then I just go, okay, take notes, and we just talk about it. And then I do take, again, have new notes from my past. And then I just tweak it from there, and I change, so it's a very much iterative process. So I do another version, and maybe do another version. So yeah, but what is a good trick to do, to really so you kind of start getting to the point where you're kind of not telepathic, but you go, okay, we know what we're doing now, we're on the same page about where we're taking this creatively. And I know you don't want animal sounds before this happens. We'll have I'll use sounds from a different source, for these things. And oh, you don't like bird sounds, okay, that's fine, I won't use birds then, on that thing. In these, too much bird, too little bird, blah, blah, blah. Birds are usually contentious. But what I tend to do is if it's a film that has scenes which are more abstract or might need, or a dream sequence or something like that, I usually try to get start working on those scenes very early on in the rough cut. So when a film isn't locked yet, the picture isn't completely finished, but they've got a version of these scenes which are probably quite complex and might be lots of cuts, or it might be, you know, lots of things. Maybe the music is yet to be composed and things like that. So, but it needs some really strong sound designy ideas that are quite maybe fantasy or things like that. So I tend to just go, right, I want to do a sound sketch on that very early on, as early as I can, because so we have time to the director's time to reflect on it for the longest time, because it's probably going to be the trickiest thing to decide on what they want for it, you know. So I usually go maybe through 10 different versions or more on those scenes which are needing more work. So it's kind of, I always feel like, but you know, it's their word is final. If they just turn around like, no, I definitely want that, I'm not going to argue unless unless I think it's not going to work technically, if that makes sense. So if something that's far too loud, we can't take it louder because Dolby, you know, the Dolby says that, you know, the computer's going to blow up. So things like that, or yeah, convention. So it can be really tricky, because you can go, sometimes the director wants to take it in a direction where I feel like, doesn't sound very good, but I just have to, you know, I can just go, in my professional opinion, I don't think it sounds good, but you know, I'd rather do this because, and then explain why you feel this or why you think that. You always have to have, you know, explanation why. You can't just say, I don't like it, because in the end of the day, it's their film, so they decide. But yeah, that makes sense. Long answer, sorry.
Great, thank you. We've got a few questions in the chat.
Oh yeah.
So they're kind of some related, some non-related. So I'm just going to go for a few, if that's okay.
Yeah.
So we've got a question from Danielle here that says, how would you recommend to go about learning / self-teaching Pro Tools? There's a plethora of tutorials and information out there, and it can feel quite overwhelming.
Yeah. Pro Tools, it's just, I think honestly, it's just find a local filmmaker or someone who's doing a short film and just say, I'm going to do the sound for your film, and let's do it. Or so find someone who needs sound for the film, do it and learn through the process. And while you are working out, you know, it's hard, but the basics are really, I mean, I guess stuff that you kind of need, just pick any course, even if those short courses, even tutorials online, just pick one and just do that and just try work through it. And because I'm the same, it's overwhelming, the information out there, and there's no way you can learn it all. There's no way you can decide which one's the best one. So you just got to pick one and go with it. And then just do sound alikes. That's kind of what I started to do as well, and what a few people tend to do starting out, building a show reel. So taking a scene from a famous film or your favorite film, it can be anything, it can be animation, it can be horror, whatever, and recreate it and just do it. And it's all about, and at the first iteration, just don't worry how you make it sound like that. Just make it sound as close as, you know, not the original, but you know, how you would make it, and just focus on making it sound good, and then learning the standard or industry standard ways of how to make it sound like that, you know, and how it looks like in the tracks and Pro Tools. I mean, that's something, I think in my experience, you can only really learn that by getting feedback from professionals, which you can get either from getting a mentor, which I can put in the chat later, where you can find mentors, and also where you can get feedback from professionals. There's some really good resources out there at the moment. Or just learning from, I always say the best way to learn, if you want to work and have it as a job, you really need to learn from professionals. It's really, really hard to be self-taught, because there's a lot of industry standards which are really specific that, is really, you won't really find. Even National Film School rarely teaches the industry standard for doing stuff. It's just stuff you have to learn on the job and learning from others as an assistant, or sitting in and shadow people. That's also a really good way to learn about how how people use the tools and use the software and what it looks like and why they use it like that. So my top tip is, starting out, just get in touch with lots of different sound editors and different departments, depending on, you might not know which area of sound you want to go into, but just sitting in with a sound editor for a day and ask them, hey, can I just watch you work for a day? And just, and most people will go, yeah, sure, when I'm not too busy. Yeah. And then you can ask them questions as you go along. I've done that. I tend to do that quite a bit in Brighton in my studio here. So yeah, just watching people work, but just, have fun with it. That's the main thing.
Thanks. Yeah, it definitely can be overwhelming, isn't it, when you've got the whole of Pro Tools. Great. We've got a question here from Joe, which is sort of related back to the working with the director. Have you worked on any films where the director is actually really interested in creative or experimental sound design and makes that an important aspect of the film? And then Kerry's also tagged on here. What happens, how does it work between composers and sound designers in more experimental contexts?
Yeah, that's a great question. The second one I'll get to shortly, because I've got a really good example that I worked on. But yeah, with the first, there's quite a lot of directors who are really into it, and that's probably quite easy to work with directors who are really into sound and look up to and have a lot, and like directors who are also into sound. So, working with directors like, oh, I really love David Lynch, can we make it sound like that? I'm like, yes. We have reference. We know where to go, and we can twist it from there. So we can take Lynch, it's like, we're going to twist it even further or make it our own, or I find it really fun, and the process is a lot more straightforward if you work with a director who likes sound, who are into it and get excited by it. And you kind of, obviously you've got something in common there, so you usually kind of click really well and become really good friends, because you're like, yeah, let's do that. And you're like, you feel like you are, I don't know, it's that kind of, what's the word, I'm sure there's a word for it, when you feel like you're just, flowing the flow in the zone. So no, that was great fun. And the other one, with composers and sound designers, experimental context, when it's very rare to work on a film where the director go, can we go make it experimental? Because experimental is very subjective. Sometimes they say they want experimental, they're like, oh yeah, do crazy stuff, just do what you want to do, yeah, go for it. And I've done that, and they go, and they listen it back, and they're like, oh no, and you've gone too far, because what they actually wanted, what they say they want, and what they actually want, sometimes very different. Again, show and tell. All you can do is like, oh yeah, you want this, I can do this, and you show it to them, and then they go like, oh, like that, but upside down or yellow. So yeah, to get that, it's all about the feedback process. But I did work on a horror film a few years ago, which was British production, shot and set in Kolkata in India. So it was amazing. I got to go there, got to record a library of Kolkata. It was incredible, because the director was like, we got a horror film, it needs to sound like no place on earth sounds like that, because his family was from there, so he knew it very well. So I did that. It was great. And he wanted me and the composer to basically, like, the sound design and the music to be like that, to basically blend. So we had to work on, how do we do this? So we basically decided that we obviously send our version. So and I need to decide, was the composer, she sent me cues early on, and I sent her, my stereo mixes of scenes that she could sync up and have as reference on her end. So we sent references to each other, what we were working as very early on in the process. And also I sent sound effects to her that she used in the music as instruments, and messed about with them. And equally, she sent me some it was a lot of percussive instruments and things like that. So weird little percussion things that I used and then used in layered up with the sound effects. So they felt like they were very much from the same room or the same world. So we swapped a lot of sounds. So that was one way of doing it, which really worked really well and was a lot of fun. And it really listening back, because you lose sight. You work on this for 6 months, and you like come up and then you watch the film that 6 months later, you go like, oh, that's actually really, it just really gels. And obviously it does, because we work together quite a lot. But yeah, when you're in it, you try, sometimes it's hard to know how, much the sound of design and the music can kind of flow together and blend. But yeah, it can be quite, it works really well if it's considered. But again, that has to come from the director. Usually some find that it's they decide, how they want the team to work together.
That sounds really cool. I know you've spoken a bit about the process, as we've gone along, but I wonder whether you could speak about particularly the work that you do from the very initial stages. I mean, maybe you could take God's Own Country as an example, and because I'd love to see a bit of the clip. But yeah, it'd be great to hear about how it's formed from the very beginning to the kind of the end process when you're in that cinema space. Yeah, I'd love to see a bit of the clip as well.
Yeah, I'm going to show a clip from that I kind of tend to show from my show reel, so I will just share this with you. Let's see. There we go. Oh, God, I can't turn. Oops. Yes, this is the. Can everyone see this? Yeah.
Yep.
Oh crap! Hold on. Sorry. Play. The zoom bar is in the way. That's fine.
What are you doing? Fuck you! Hey! Просто.
Sorry. Yes, cool. So yeah, that was a very short clip, but it illustrates one of the kind of sound design moments. So the video quality isn't great because I had to rip it from a DVD a few years ago. But yeah, it's basically at the end of the film that where basically Georgie and Johnny have got together, and then things happen and they kind of fall out a bit, and then George decides to leave, and this is when actually he finds him and he pushes him back, gets a car, and then Johnny starts realizing that he's losing the love of his life, is just walking out of his life. So it's kind of the culmination of before in the film. Obviously, wind has a big. It's almost like a score of the film. There's a lot of wind. It's very windy up there, and the wind again is very much. It kind of acts a bit like a Greek chorus, which, if you know kind of Greek opera, it basically says like there is usually like a like this characters, things are doing the acting and playing out the story. Meanwhile, there's a choir that's kind of singing, like explaining what's happening internally, what we, showing what isn't shown by the actors. So basically it means that the wind is basically telling the audience through emotion what they're feeling, what the characters are feeling inside, because they can't say it out loud. So that's the idea. That was the director's idea after a lot of feedback. This is the feedback process ago. What do you think? Actually, can we try something else? And then realizing over time and reflection and stuff, actually, wow, let's try this. And that's kind of what you hear in the film. So you got several wind sounds. You got one wind, which we named Georgie's wind, which is a very wispy wind, and that wind you only really hear when they kind of basically fall in love at that moment, when Johnny realizes that, wow, when they're having an intimate moment, and then also comes back once Georgie is left. So whenever Johnny is missing him or finds an object that he used to belong to him, you will hear this wind again, and it's very, very, very subtle. But it's something that's just very much of almost like a instrument that comes back, like a Geordie's theme, if you look at, that kind of device. So using that but a wind. So, and in this scene, basically all the wind just falls out of the sky. So we're just hearing his breathing and the car engine, that also the engine starts kind of drifting away, because almost like you have this internal kind of, we're just focusing on the breathing, and it's almost like we're going into his head. It's becoming subjective. We're hearing the world from Johnny's point of view, and that kind of subjectivity is something that I love working with, not throughout the film, just on these specific points in the story, because again, it's using sound as storytelling. So we're telling the story with the sound. The sound is telling us what's important, because there is nothing, we'd only see what we see, we only hear what we hear. There's not really no words or no dialogue in this point in the film, or the story is explaining this. So it's illustrating his emotional point of view, his emotional state. So yeah, he's just realizing, oh crap, so, and it's quite a long, and in the edit we tried this in the sound edit quite early on in the process when we're in the rough cut, and the picture edit actually extended the shot so it goes on for a bit longer, because we're like, let's have another breath and another breath, another point, boom, okay, cut, next. So we stay in that kind of, it builds and builds, and it stays in that kind of with that sound for a bit longer to make the point. But it's very subtle, and also yeah, and I think it had the car running initially. I think they had the car engine running as well. Blah, 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 blah. Of course, the car engine is obviously off screen, but we hear all the things that are happening outside the screen. So obviously bringing all that, the world in that we can't see as well, like showing the sound also is telling us things that the camera can't show, basically, both physically and emotionally. So yeah, but then the mix, I think we decided to should we try and just trail the sound of the engine away, making that they fade out? Yeah, let's try it. And it was really effective, so we stayed with that. So these things, like, I always tend to throw all the sounds. So there's a car engine, there's wind, there's breathing, and then in the mix and that collaborative phase when we try things out, it's when we kind of, actually, do we need that sound? Do we really need that sound? How much? Usually the mix process is just about taking away sounds, adding a few, but mainly taking away. So you just like decide what the important sounds are. And I think it's also Walter Murch used to say, like, this sound, there should only be 2.5 sounds playing at the same time at any one moment, which sounds ridiculous, but it basically means that there's only so much information we can take in and that we focus on and we notice. So obviously there's a lot of sound going on all the time, but the sounds which we notice and that play an important role in the story are the things that we see happening on the screen at this moment. We don't need that many. We shouldn't have a clock ticking and the music playing and someone talking and dog barking. We should just decide, okay, hey, they can happen, but in this moment we might want to fade one out, and then one a bit louder, the clock ticking louder because it's intense, and also we starting to hear these micro sounds. I call them, like, breathing is what I call a micro sound. Those sounds which are really subtle, we should only really hear when you're physically close to someone, and suddenly we're like, wow, those sounds can be really effective to turn up. And that's usually Foley sounds as well, like, because it's intimacy. In that moment we're intimate. We are Johnny. We are, because we can hear him breathing really loudly. And in the cinema, obviously, it's a lot more effective than through Zoom. But yeah, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and as part of that process of tweaking, how much time do you have to take stepping away and coming back? Because I imagine you can get quite immersed and quite into the sound, and perhaps you need to take, do you take time to come back to it?
I wish. I would love to.
Yeah.
There is no time. The schedules are quite tight, so we just gotta get through it quickly. But I guess, yeah, those decisions sometimes it really is about having everything else sorted. So you have your everything else sounds beautiful, so you've got time to just focus on these details, which can be tricky depending on again, how if the director knows what they like and knows what they want, it's easier. If you've got a longer, the more time you have, better it's going to sound, because exactly what you say, you've got this time to sit and reflect and try things out, and that's always the way. The films that I think worked out the most are those which we perhaps were delayed by other things, by the universe, or they had a longer time where I sat and collaborated and sat and working on these key scenes. I mean, this scene wasn't really I can't remember if it was a scene that I started on quite early on, and we might have tried a few things and then got familiar with it, and then we're like, actually, we can try something different, or should we try something new? You know, I tend to forget how the process sometimes was. But yeah, more time the better, for sure.
Yeah, great, thank you. It's also so fascinating. Does anyone else have any questions or anything that they'd like to hear Anna speak about before? We've got a few more questions in the chat, but you know, feel free to ask away if you have any other questions.
I can see one question about from Joe about the boom mic used in preference for is the boom mic for actors, is the boom mic used in preference to a clip or lavalier mic, and if so, is that because of the risk of rustling clothes noises with a clip on mic? We tend to prefer the boom because it's a bigger mic, and the bigger mic's got more, can record more lower frequencies. And it's very subtle. I mean, the boom and clip mic, obviously clip mic tends to be obviously not has as many low frequencies, but it's very subtle. But the boom mic is just usually a better, this is better mic. There's more microphone physically to record things, and also for the fact that it won't get any mic rustle and mic rustle and clothes rustle on them. They're suspended by a person and pointing at the mouth as close as they possibly can. So literally that's so this is just outside a shot at all times. So yeah, the boom mic is really, but then, you know, it's all, sometimes you gotta just use the radio, and sometimes it's preferred. It depends on the director prefers it, the sound of the radio mic. But yeah, rule, but the general rule is we just choose the boom mic.
Thanks.
Thanks, Joe. So you've got a clip, I think, from Adult Life Skills as well, have you? I wonder if you could talk about like the layering process that's going on there, or what your process was with that one, if you can get it up.
Definitely. Great. I'm going to show, so this is something I'm going to share the whole clip, because I'm not going to show all of it. I'm just going to put it here in the chat, because that just links to what I'm going to show you. So if you could look at it your time if you want to watch it in completion. But it's a scene from the film Adult Life Skills, starring Jodie Whittaker, before she was Doctor Who. I worked a few years ago, and this is a scene that's just to illustrate the different layers. I spoke about earlier about the different kind of sound departments. So you got dialogue, sound effects, and Foley, and the mix. So this is basically the same scene played several times. So first time you see and hear it, it's what was recorded on set. So it's going to be a bit noisy, a bit rustly, and basically what we call the offline. So that's basically when the picture editor's finished editing it, and because they've got all the sounds, like usually they work with all the mics. So you've got all the radio mics and the boom mics, if there's more than one, all mixed together. So that's the sound that we're giving, and then obviously they're in different tracks, and then we pick the best one, we pick the boom if it's good. So that's, and then basically the same scene, but with just the dialogue, and then just the Foley, and then just the sound effects, and then the last sound it plays, it's mixed together. So the version you would hear in the cinema, so you can really hear what each department kind of produces. So I thought I'd play it first with what we hear and what we get, the rough stuff, and then I'll just maybe play part of it with just each thing. So I won't take too much time, but let's see, I will share screen. That's the one. So this is before the sound editing process started. See if you can hear this.
Were you up all night watching Grease on the telly?
No. Were you?
My mum had it on.
Oh, aye. My mum had it on.
She did. Have you seen Grease?
Yeah.
At the end of the film, he turns up in a white coat, like dressed like her, and she turns up in black, dressed like him, and they look at each other, and then he just takes off his coat, like, yeah, we'll dress like me then. There's not even a discussion, like maybe they could dress like her. Like, I know it's the 50s, but that is everyday sexism gone mad. It's 21.
How do you know that?
I like counting.
This is the clean-up dialogue.
Were you up all night watching Grease on the telly?
No. Were you?
My mum had it on.
Oh, aye. My mum had it on.
She did. Have you seen Grease?
Yeah.
At the end of the film, he turns up in a white coat, like dressed like her, and she turns up in black, dressed like him, and they look at each other, and then he just takes off his coat, like, yeah, we'll dress
So
like
I'm
me.
going to fast forward now to this, the Foley. So that was just all that was just recorded in a studio indoors. And then we've got the sound effects. Got some birds tweeting, the way. And that was using also some sounds I recorded on that location during the shoot. So I recorded a BMX bike and ambiances from Skimondon, which this is the shooting location. And then this is the everything combined. So what you heard at the beginning, from that was just the dialogue that we used. And there's one ADR line, I don't know if you spotted it, it's when you said, oh, my mum had it on. That line we recorded in the studio because there was too much rustling because there's all this, and then we re-recorded the Foley with all the top hall and everything, and so it's what you heard in the cinema, so all the layers combined.
Were you up all night watching Grease on the telly?
No. Were you?
My mum had it on.
Oh, aye. My mum had it on.
She did. Have you seen Grease?
Yeah.
At the end of the film, he turns up in a white coat, like dressed like her, and she turns up in black, dressed like him, and they look at each other, and then he just takes off his coat, like, yeah, we'll dress like me then. There's not even a discussion, like maybe they could dress like her. Like, I know it's the 50s, but that is everyday sexism gone mad. It's 21.
How do you know that?
I like counting.
So yeah, those are the kind of the layers, which we all take for granted, right? When watching this, and we don't think about this all the Foley is all made separately, and the sound effects are all separately. So yeah, that's it. So, and obviously the footsteps weren't recorded on set, all that, and the ducks we don't hear, they weren't there on the day, and so yeah, that's kind of how it kind of all layered up. So it's quite fun to be able to show that.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Yeah, super cool. Got a completely question, that's not related, but from Danielle. Do you have any tips for making the most out of being a runner at a post house and progressing with the sound department?
Ooh, good question. I think that all depends on the company you're working for. So it's what their policy is with how, and ask, how often and how quickly they promote runners. And I think, this is the thing. This is just me. I think that in my experience, what I've heard and in my experience is that those runners who tend to move up into the sound department are those who really, show a lot of interest and ask a lot of questions and ask to sit in and watch them, the colleagues, the more senior colleagues, work, and ask to help out and just be super keen and just go, yeah, I can do that. I can help with that. Yeah. My colleagues who are mixers and who work in these facilities, they sometimes tell me, like, oh, we got runners who really have no interest in sound. I'm like, really? How do they get a job? But yeah, so it's about really, but then again, sometimes it's not just about what you do. You can only go so far in showing your enthusiasm and asking to help out and wanting to sit in. You have to be in an environment and in a facility, in a company that have a clear and very, clear and transparent process of giving runners opportunities and training opportunities is really important. So it depends on on that as well. So I think it's really important to, if you are looking for a runner position in a company with the aim of going up, working way up in a sound department, ask the runners who work there, for example, hey, what's it like working here as a runner? Do you get to help out in the sound department? Are you here because you want to work in the sound department? And equally ask them, be very clear about, I'm here because I want to get to this. This is my aim. This is my goal. Is this the right place for me? Yes or no? To be very clear about it, because just communicating that, I think, and telling everyone, that that's what you want to do is really important. So people know about it.
Thanks. Does anyone else have any more questions? Because we've probably got time for like one or two more questions if you have any burning things you want to ask Anna. If not, I've got loads. So okay, I'm going to roll with one. What are you working on at the moment? I mean, maybe you can't say, but have you got anything in the works? What are you working on?
At the moment, not much. I'm about to start on an American game of some sort. It's going to be like basically Wall-E, but different, if that makes sense. So I'm going to be making a lot of little servo sounds and things like that. And because American company, they want to own all the sounds once the project's done, which means I can't use any existing sounds. So it's a fun challenge. So yeah, I'm going to be making little robot sounds in my bedroom now, because this is where I work. But obviously I've got this colleague of mine where I have my studio stuff, but it's a bit noisy there, so I'm probably going to do a lot of stuff I need quiet. So yeah, that's what I'm doing. And I'm doing a couple of short films, which are proof of concept for, hopefully, to make feature versions of those short films. That's how a lot of directors start out, and it's BFI funded. And then I've finished the last thing, because I've had a bit of a break because I worked on a feature which took a long time, much longer than I expected. It's called Medusa Deluxe. Strange name, I know. And it's a kind of a dark comedy about a murder mystery at a hairdressing competition in outskirts of Manchester. So yeah, I don't know how. I think we've finished it a few weeks ago, but again, this is a long process. Usually when we finish a film, especially films take a long time, because films, they want the film to go through as many film festivals as they can kind of submit it to. So usually from the point where I finish a film until the point where it's in the cinema and other people have heard about it, can be up to a year. So if you're lucky, you'll hear up Medusa Deluxe, 2022. TV is different. Obviously, TV, you finish it and then probably within the next 6 months, because they usually have decided already what date and what time it's going to be broadcast at, which is always very secret. So that's what we're doing at the moment.
Great, Medusa Deluxe. I'll
Yeah.
keep an eye out. We've got a final question here from Joe. Always great with the questions, Joe. Thank you. How much do films rely on using pre-recorded sounds from commercial sound libraries as opposed to Foley or location sound?
Yes. I think it's usually like 90% pre-recorded stuff from libraries, I'd say. Yeah. Especially,
That's really high.
it's a lot, yeah, because it's again, I mean, obviously not counting Foley. Yes, the Foley, obviously all of it is recorded for the film specifically. But for when I sit and do sound effects and atlases, I very rarely have time to go out and record that much stuff, because it's really time consuming. It's something as I said, depending on the film and if I can go on visit the set, and if it's shot in a place, filmed in a place that is really it's got some, it really, where it makes sense to go and record sounds for it, like Gods and Country made complete sense. Out of Life Skills, I went to Yorkshire. The best films I made in Yorkshire was going on. So yeah, that's, I had a great time going there, recording a lot of, but then it was less about the winds and things like that. I did it because I just, again, any excuse to go to Yorkshire, any excuse to get out of the southeast is fun. So I think there I recorded again a small library for the film that I tend to use as much as I can, because I like it and it makes the film sound unique. No other film's going to sound like this, because it's my sounds I recorded on that place. So for me, that's quite fun and important. And directors tend to like that as well, because they feel like, oh, it's special. So yeah. But yeah, no, it's mostly for sure.
And you can normally find what you want in a sound library, can you? Just because they're so vast, so they contain so many sounds.
Yeah, but I tend to also, almost for every project I work on, I buy extra sounds that I find on sounddogs.com.
Right.
I buy a lot of stuff from sounddogs.com.
Right, I'll look at that.
If you know of it, but because you can buy individual sounds, instead of having to buy the whole library. They used to come on CDs, and you used to be able to that was like, the big Hollywood Edge or Digifacts or the BBC library or Sound Ideas. Those are the big kind of libraries. They're huge. I haven't got all of them. I don't think anyone does. But on Sound Dogs, you can actually, all these huge libraries, which they pretty much got a sound for everything on earth. So you can just search by I just want the sound of that, rather than having to buy 100 sounds, which is a bit pricey. So that's why you tend to use that. Free sound is really good as well. I'm sure you know Free Sound, which is free. Again, it's hit and miss. It's very much, collective, sound collectively based. So you might not be able to find everything you need there. But again, it's quite fun because, there's a lot of variation. So yeah, and A Sound Effect is a really good independent sound library website shop as well. I've got a few my sound libraries are for sale there. Some big, some small. I've only got a few, but there is lots of anyone can make a sound library and sell it through a sound effect. I'm not plugging it, but it's just because I tend to use it, and I tend to buy quite a lot of sound effects, smaller sound libraries, really specific ones from there as well, because there's hundreds and hundreds. So yeah, but I tend to just buy specific things when I need it.
Got another last minute question from Abby. Is there a present day version of the Wilhelm scream, e.g. a library sound effects that you keep spotting everywhere? But do you, can you tune into these when you watch things?
There is a door sound that I recognize and I hear it all the time, and I always go, lazy sound effects editors. Because it's I hear it in Simpsons a lot, and I tend to hear it a lot of TV drama as well. It's a door sound. It's PE 14. I mean, I used to know the whole idea of it, but literally it's hilarious. That's what I know. I should really have a holiday. It's getting ridiculous because I go, that's that door sound again. Because it's got a bit of a melodic squeak at the end. Click, click, that's the one.
Wow. I mean, I bet you, we're going to have to finish now, but I bet you just hear so many sounds everywhere in, you know, in your everyday life and within the things that you're watching. It must be hard to, you know, tune off, tune out. But thank you so much, Anna. It's been absolutely fascinating. We've got a few people asking for the name of the book.
Yes.
If you wouldn't mind writing that in the chat, that would be amazing.
Definitely will do.
And yeah, any links for the mentor feedback.
Yes.
I mean, it would be great if you could email us as well, and we can send that out in the email to everyone afterwards. That would be great. But it's been super fascinating to learn about the ins and outs of film, audio, and effects. And I'm really gonna probably change the way I watch things now, for sure.
Cool.
So they are there. Brilliant.
I've got a couple of links in that. Not that I'm literally, I just Googled the book very quickly. It's called The Universal Sense. The book is called The Universal Sense: How Hearing Shapes the Mind, by Seth Horowitz. He's a scientist and his wife is a sound artist. So and he's been researching psychoacoustics for years. Not that I promote Amazon, but there it is if you want to find it. And UKPSC, it stands for UK Post Sound Collective. It is set up by a friend and colleague of mine. It is basically aims to provide practical industry advice for anyone in the UK who identifies as a woman, trans, non-binary, and from an ethnic minority, and interested in a career in sound editing and sound mixing for film and TV. So if that's, applies to you and you want to know more, you can find professionals there and just email Steve, it's a guy called Steve Little who set it up, and he's lovely, and you can just email him and say, like, on the website, it's all there, say like, I want to talk to, someone who works in Foley or a mixer or anything like that, and just ask them what's it like working like that, and ask for like feedback, advice and things like that. So I've had quite a lot of people contacting me through that, and I tend to do like half an hour Zoom call to chat, who just chat about how to get into sound, or how to, if you're already in sound, how to get further into sound, or any other questions sound related. So yeah, wow, it's a great amazing resource.
Yeah, thank you so much for all that information, and for sharing with us your wisdom and your advice and your experiences. Thank you. We'll send around the links and feedback tomorrow. And as for the next Yorkshire Sound Women Network seminar, stay tuned. We've got one coming in July, mid to end of July, so we'll send out details to that. So yeah, thank you so much, everyone. I hope you all have a nice rest of evening. And yeah, we'll see you next time. Thank you so much, Anna.
No worries. Thank you. Thank you so much. And thanks everyone for listening. Have a lovely rest of your evening. Hope to speak to you soon.
Yeah.
Take care.